All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Gene, and I am going now to talk. I'm going to give my English language testimony for the month of October. And this time I'm going to kind of give a. I'm not going to testify for the same people I testified for the last two times. I actually did that already this month in Uygur. But in English now I'm going to talk about Kyrgyz students. So basically, the students from Kyrgyzstan. From the Kızılsu Kyrgyz Autonomous Prefecture in Xinjiang, who were studying in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, and who went back to Kızılsu at some point, often for vacation or some were pressured to go back, and then never came back to finish their studies. So I have a bit of an update on this. Since I recently went to Bishkek about 2 weeks ago, which is something I haven't done really properly in a while. So I originally went to Bishkek in December of last year. I stayed about a month, and I was going there at the time to really look into this this issue of kind of the Kyrgyz starting to speak out about their relatives in Xinjiang. So that was happening at the time, and while I was there, I ended up getting interested in this topic of Kyrgyz students, because some of the Kyrgyz activists had made a whole list of students, about 44 students, I think, 45 plus a teacher, something like that, of students who went back for vacation or other reasons and then just disappeared. And so I actually started going around universities. I started visiting these different colleges, universities, and trying to ask about these students and trying to confirm that some of them were missing. And in fact, I found out that some were, and I was able to get confirmation. And so kind of so basically in March of this year, well, hold on, no, let me align this chronologically. So yeah, so I stayed there in December, then in a couple of weeks after I left in January, I got wind that supposedly the security forces, or somebody in security forces, was planning to write a sort of I guess do something against people who had been covering this topic. And just 2 weeks after that, there was a hit piece written about me in the Kyrgyz kind of pro-security, I guess security influenced tabloid paper called Delovoy Nomer, or Delo Nomer. And so that's after that, they basically accused me of being responsible for the anti-China sentiment and all the protests that were happening in Kyrgyzstan, which is very funny. Obviously, it's not true. The whole article was also a bit absurd and silly at times. But in any case, after that, I decided probably it wasn't a good idea for me to go to Bishkek for a while. So the few times I have gone, I've actually just gone to the border to get, to extend my visa. I've gone to the border and turned around and came right back. And so I've been doing that since. Haven't really gone back there since then, and it was only 10 days ago that I actually went back and I spent a night in Bishkek, and thankfully nothing happened, nobody bothered me. And I also used this chance to go to the university again and ask about certain students. Not very much, because again, I didn't want to push it. I didn't want to push my luck, but still, I did ask about some and I got an update. So what was interesting is with this whole story is that in March, towards the very end of March of last year, I published this article in Foreign Policy about Kyrgyz students who are vanishing, basically, after going back to Xinjiang. And the key protagonist of this article was this talented young man named Turgunali Tursunali, who, or he's commonly known as Turgunali Justmamai. Justmamai is actually his grandfather, and his grandfather is a world-famous legendary, he's passed away now, a world-famous legendary Manaschi. A Manaschi is basically a guy, it's a performer, a singer kind of the Manas epic, a performer of the Manas epic, and his grandfather was one of the great, probably the last great Manaschi in the world. And Manas is it's this very, very long epic. So if you think of Homer's, like the Iliad or the Odyssey, I believe actually the Manas is longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And so these people, they recite this Manas, and they can go on for days sometimes reciting it. So it's a very huge Kyrgyz tradition. It's a cultural heritage. And so Turgunali was he was the only, he was the only grandson of his grandfather who decided to seriously continue this Manas thing, and so he did it, and he was a master's student in Manas studies at the Kyrgyz National University, and he was actually quite a celebrity there as well. And so he went back to China from Kyrgyzstan in October of last year, and basically he suspected that something might happen to him, or he might not be able to return, but he still decided to go back because apparently there was pressure on him, and so, or pressure on his family. And so he went back and he disappeared. And so there was no news of him for a while. I met a friend of his who said he promised me he would get in touch with me, whatever it took, and he didn't. And this friend suggested that I make him the protagonist of any article I was writing about the students, and so I did. And he was quite a famous person, so he was quite he was a mini celebrity. He was also famous for bringing folk dancing, for the Kara Jorgo dance in Kyrgyzstan. He had his own studio in Bishkek as well. And so I wrote about him, and it was funny, literally, a few days, 1 or 2 days after I wrote about him, the Kyrgyz media, and also as well as the Kyrgyz branch of Radio Free Europe, picked up the story and ran it in Russian and Kyrgyz, and it kind of made its way around. And then, maybe like a day or two after this, suddenly there were these photos of Turgunali that his friends were now sharing that had supposedly come from China. And so one of them was this kind of photo from a wedding shoot of Turgunali and his wife, which was probably an old photo. It wasn't taken just then. And then there was another, so one of the, the news was that Turgunali got married and that he was doing fine. And then there was another one of him kind of in a car with a tour guide badge showing, which was supposed to reinforce the supposed news that he was working as a guide in his museum, in Akchi County of Kızılsu Prefecture. There's actually a museum dedicated to his grandfather, Father Yusuf Mamay, and I think that's where he was supposedly now working. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but these pictures came immediately after this article was written. And what was even funnier is that another few weeks later, about a month later, Turgunali actually came back to Kyrgyzstan. So after all of this time of no news and people worrying about him, he came back to Kyrgyzstan. So here's this picture of him and his friend. This is in the middle of May. And again, Radio Free Europe, the Kyrgyz language service wrote an article about him saying, okay, he came back to continue his studies. And then a month later, there was suddenly his friend again, the same friend who had been posting all of these pictures, posted another one showing that, okay, well, like we're saying goodbye to Turgunali, he's going back again. So about a month later already, he was going back. And since then, there's again been no news. So this time I actually went back. I went to, again, his department. I tried to see the dean of the Manas Studies department when I was in Bishkek about 10 or so days ago. The dean was out. So I asked one of the staff who was working in the adjacent office. She said, well, I don't know when the dean is coming back. I also didn't want to linger for too long. So I asked her and said, well, okay, I just wanted to find out, do you know Turgunali Yusuf Mamay? And she said, and she immediately became a bit serious, and she just kind of nodded like this. And I tried to ask more. I said, do you know if has he come back from China? She said, oh, I don't know. I said, well, I read about it in the news, that he came back from China in April or May to continue his studies. And she's like, oh, I don't know about that, which again is very unlikely. I said, well, I don't. And I said, well, I read that, and I heard that he went back again. I was wondering if he had come back. She's like, oh, I don't know. So she became very tight-lipped, didn't tell me anything. So I left. I also heard from somebody who met with people in Kyrgyzstan who were kind of abreast of this news, and they said that Turgunali basically came back for only a few weeks. He only saw again, this is hearsay, this is not verified information in this case. He only really interacted with his close circle and didn't tell them much. Supposedly he even praised the Communist Party on certain occasions. I tried to message him while he was there, he never replied. I tried to message his friend never replied to me either. So I wasn't able to get any direct confirmation from him, but basically it sounded like he came back supposedly to do some paperwork for a few weeks, and then he left again. And now, since he left in June, he's been gone, and it doesn't, based on what the people at his department were telling me he doesn't seem to have come back. So again, he's disappeared, and so this is a person that, again, we should keep watching and should be worried about. So that's Turgun Ali. He's kind of the star of this whole Kyrgyz students, quote-unquote, crisis. But apart from him, there's also a lot of other people. So there's at least 40 or 50 students that, you know, we more or less know about that have left and disappeared, including one teacher. I only really had time to, last year when I went to the universities, one department that was very helpful for me was the Russian language department. So a lot of Kyrgyz from China were actually studying at the Kyrgyz National University in the Russian language department, learning Russian as a foreign language. So that's where a lot of people were. I was actually able to get, and I should have prepared these in advance, but they're within arm's reach, so I'll get them now. But so I was actually able to get these sort of expulsion orders, copies of them. So these are all for ethnic Kyrgyz students who were studying at the Russian department at the Kyrgyz National University, who were basically expelled from the school because they either did not pay their tuition or they did not attend the classes. And the reason they didn't do that is because they weren't physically there. So these are students who were supposed to come back from vacation to continue paying tuition, continue attending classes. They never did, so they were expelled by default. And so there's, there's maybe 20 or so students that we have official expulsion orders for. The department confirmed them. And so I stopped very briefly at this department just to ask them in person. And there was a secretary who was there who actually remembered me from last year, and I asked her. If, where these, if any of these students, because Turgun Ali came back almost as a result of, I think it's almost safe to say he came back as a result of the article that was written about him, because that was too much of a coincidence otherwise. And so, I had heard that from other activists in Kyrgyzstan, they said that a few students supposedly came back. And so I wanted to see if any of these students in the Russian department came back, and they told me that actually one did. That one being, let me get his picture. That one being Tarshibek Ali Sherk, who was a sophomore in the Russian department. I think he went back in 2017, end of 2017, didn't come back after that, and only came back to continue his studies this year, in the spring, I guess. They said he did one semester, then he left to go back to China, and now he hasn't come back again. So again, it's already been a month since this fall semester started, since he should have come back, and again, he's gone missing. So this is the only case they said of a student in their department, an ethnic Kyrgyz student from China, who returned. And everybody else who was there that's missing is apparently still missing. So I'm going to very quickly kind of testify for them as well. I don't know very much about these guys individually, so it's mostly going to be pictures and names, but still. So the first is Dolkun Mirbek. So he was a junior in the department. And actually with Dolkun, it's funny because a guy I know who had lived in Xinjiang, a foreigner, actually knows him as well. He had met him in Bishkek before, and he told me about him. He's actually, I know this guy, and he has him on WeChat, and he says his WeChat is completely empty right now, so he can't even talk to him. So it's not clear what Dolkun's situation is. He's definitely not back in Bishkek, not studying, not continuing his studies, not finishing his major. Another student is Dr. Nur Bilek, who's a sophomore in the same department. Another is Aitkul Murat, also a sophomore. Then another sophomore, Suhan Nikesh. So these are all people who were studying there, left probably at the end of 2017, I think, for the majority of them, and they were expelled after they never came back. This is another guy, Sergak Mater. He's a junior, but actually with him, a friend of him has told me that he updates his WeChat from time to time. So it seems that he, at least with him, it seems like he hasn't really been detained anywhere, hopefully. But that's news as of last December, January, or February of this year. So this is already new. I don't know what his current situation is. Another student is Shinar Abdullah, a sophomore. and another Dinara Askar, also a sophomore. And so those are all the ones I have pictures for. And then there's a list of, I have a whole list of students, other students from that department who are confirmed as having left, generally ethnic Kyrgyz. There's 2 Uyghurs in here, I think, as well, who went missing, never came back, and we don't know what's happened to them really. So again, I will just read their names. So for freshmen in the Russian language department at the Kyrgyz National University, of those who have gone missing, there's Nurlanbek Karan, Irmat Kalen, Bajigul Toktobay. For sophomores, there's Guljamal Imanjan, Gulshat Turdakhun, Dilkhumar Dolkun, Charshan Ale, Beshen Ale. For juniors, Toktunur Makin, Aychurk Akhat, Aklay Mukanbek, and Saltanat Bakhtiyar, Gulnara Nur Mehmet. Saltanat Bakhtiyar and Gulnara Nur Mehmet, I believe, are both Uyghur, judging by the names. And then there's Rizkildi Tolugun, who is a senior. So he was in last year, about to finish really, and then he went back to China, he disappeared, and voila, so there goes all that study. Traded for other kinds of study. So yeah, this is the list. So again, I'm testifying I don't actually know any of these people. Do they mean a lot to me? It's hard to say. But if I don't do this, or if other people don't do it, nobody's going to do it, because their friends in Kyrgyzstan, for whatever reason, obviously aren't speaking up about this. I know a lot of that is fear. A lot of it is not always well-founded fear. It's just unfounded kind of general fear of something will happen to us if we talk about these dangerous things. But these are friends of these people. They really should be doing something, or at least trying to do something. They're not. So unfortunately, that task is left to people like us to speak up for them. So that's all. That's my video for these students. So basically, all of these people are still missing. 1 came back, 2 came back. Turgunali came back for a few weeks, left again, disappeared. Charshan, not Charshan Ali, but Charshibek Alisher came back for a semester, went back, and again disappeared. Everybody else, no idea what's happened to them. They're still missing. That's my update just for those 20 or so students. So that's it for now. All the best.